This is the Global Broadcasting Service, serving remote outposts since 1928.
Hi, everyone. Welcome aboard the Walt Disney World Express monorail.
Caramba, we have something really big for you today.
Welcome, foolish mortals.
Now then, hang on to them hats and glasses, because this here's the wildest ride in the wilderness.
This is the DBC Pod with Phil Schoen and Jason Dodge. Hey everyone, welcome to this week's Pod, the show for the week of February 13th, 2023. This week we're going to discuss a lot of IP-themed lands, if they fit in the Magic Kingdom, our takes on the Disney Pixar animated sequels, top 3 must-do non-headliners. So these are the rides that you have to tell people that you need to go on that maybe they've never heard before if they've never been to Disney World. We're going to talk about the Disney DBC engagement for how we would retheme Cinderella's castle. Not as much engagement as I thought, though we had a couple like out of this world type of things, but we're going to take our best stab at it. But first, a lot of things happened this week, Phil, that everybody's talking about. And that was the quarterly, quarterly announcement this week. So that's what everybody was talking about in our Disney World. So we're going to talk about it now. So give us the details, Phil.
Yeah, there were a lot of other things going around, previews of Tron and stuff like that. But I kind of, the key things that I saw were 2 main areas. One of them was about Disney's first quarter earnings, which for calendar wise is for most people, the fourth quarter. But for Disney, they start their first quarter October 1st. Overall, they beat analyst expectations. And just to give, I don't want to give too many numbers, but just to kind of put in context how big Disney is, they made $23.51 billion in revenue for the quarter. So
yeah,
they're not a small company. And just specifically for the theme parks, they delivered $2.1 billion in profit, which is up 35% from last year. So doing all right.
I want to interject this. Not that Chapek needs anybody to defend him, and I'm the last person to defend him. But before everybody gives Igor the benefit of the doubt and all the credit for it, these numbers, he doesn't have anything to do with these numbers, right? He might have some impact in Q2, Q3 potentially, but this was all happening anyway. You cannot change direction of a multi-billion-dollar global media company in like 8 weeks,
right?
With the holidays in there. So before anybody starts, giving Iger some gold medals, let's kind of temper those feelings a little bit. This is the juggernaut that is Disney and moving forward.
The one negative, though, which also, if we're going to give Chapek credit for the positives, this is also on his watch too. Disney Plus lost 2.4 million subscribers in the quarter, which is the first time they've lost subscriber count. So that's kind of been the big sort of bugaboo, was just how much money they've been investing in there and just not seeing the return on that investment to date. So interesting to see what they do with it.
Well, just to give a little bit of clarity, just some reading that I've saw, a lot of these have to do with some of Disney Plus international numbers and not so much domestic Disney Plus numbers. So it wasn't like everybody in North America all of a sudden abandoned Disney Plus.
Right.
Disney Plus is a massive global network of like stars and some Indian channels and some sports that all kind of get folded in differently. So a lot of that was some international losses because they lost some licenses also. Yeah. Not to say that Disney Plus didn't lose anybody, but still, it wasn't like massive, and it was expected to. This was expected to happen.
Right. But speaking of Iger, I think he is starting to put his touch on things going forward.
Yes.
And what an incoming CEO does is they generally do some reorganizations, and that was also announced during the earnings, that they will be reorged into 3 core business segments. There will be the Disney Parks Experiences and Products. ESPN will make up its own segment, and then Disney Entertainment is the third one, which is kind of everything else. That's the movies and Disney Plus and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people are initially speculating, and it does make sense when you take something and kind of separate it out on its own thing, give it its own P&L, and kind of has to stand on its own. That's ripe for selling it off. So some people are thinking this is the first step for Disney to sell ESPN. Bob Chapek was on CNBC the next day and was very adamant about that's not what this means and that sort of thing. But I don't know. We'll see. Obviously, they're definitely trying to make it more focused and make it kind of stand on its own a little bit more than in the past. But we'll see what it means long term.
I think what this might mean is, even if they don't mean to sell it, and I don't think they're going to be selling because it's still a cash cow and it's still a known brand and they don't want to sell it. But I think it's going to be a loss leader maybe in 5 to 10 years from now. And to be able to kind of keep those losses away from other parts of the company, it's
That's
now
true.
isolated. So now the losses are going to be shown as ESPN and won't drag down Parks numbers or streaming numbers or anything else like that.
So even if it's still making money, but it's making less, when it was embedded elsewhere, it kind of would drag and be like, make that whole area look like it's making less when it's really just driven by ESPN. That makes sense. Part of this reorg is obviously about saving money. Overall, they believe they will save around $5.5 billion in expenses related to it. Part of that is they said they will be cutting around 7,000 jobs. From what we've heard, I heard that on the Disney Dish today, that they think it's a lot of just these positions are open and now we're just not going to fill them. It's not necessarily that 7,000 people are being fired. And while it isn't expected to impact all areas, according to Josh D'Amaro, he doesn't believe it'll impact frontline hourly park cast members. So this isn't.
They need more of those. So
yeah, they need more of those. They're still hiring those. They're just adding back the housekeeping. They're still trying to fill that up. So obviously, you never want to see people lose jobs, and you want more people working at Disney. But I don't think people reacted. I think initially like, "What are you talking about? You can't have 7,000 less cast members in the parks." That's not what this is. So don't worry too much about that.
Like we said before, I think people fail to realize how giant Disney is. I mean, Disney's all of Fox and Pixar and parks and marketing and toys. And like there's, ESP. I mean, there's
I had looked it up. Like
people
globally, I believe they're at around 203,000 jobs.
Something like that. Yeah,
something like that. Yeah. So this is, it's not insignificant, but again, every CEO is going to have some changes in there, and pretty much a lot of companies, especially media companies, are going through that now, where they're kind of trying to cut costs and do a little bit of this. So
I mean, just to speak of it cruelly, I mean, when you have so many different studios coming together, like with the different acquisitions and stuff like that, and when you finally do a reorg, there's going to be a lot of overlap in positions, kind of in the middle. I don't think they're firing content creators and creative. It's a lot of it's marketing and tech and all this other stuff. That's kind of unfortunate. But Wall Street seemed to like it. Yeah. I guess that's what's important, right?
Yeah.
Wall Street.
Got to make Wall Street happy.
Yes.
But they did also announce some new content and type things coming to the masses. So one thing they announced is that Disneyland will be getting an Avatar experience. They were very careful in using the words experience, not that they're going to be getting a land. I know in I think it was Singapore, there was an Avatar experience where it's kind of like a walkthrough thing where they had an animatronic banshee and stuff like that. So it'll probably something more like that versus, a full-fledged section of the park.
Like Journey of Water to me would be an experience. Like it's a static land. I don't think they're getting a ride, obviously. Well, maybe not obviously, but I don't think they're getting a ride. And I think it's just going to be like characters and maybe, like you mentioned, an animatronic that's kind of you can walk by, take some pictures of, and it'd be kind of cool.
And they also announced, and this ties into something we'll talk about later, but they announced new films are coming to several series that they believe are strong franchises they want to invest in. This includes, they said they're going to make Frozen 3, Toy Story 5, and Zootopia 2. And Iger said that this franchise investment is an example of how they are leaning into our unrivaled brands. He did also talk about, and I'll just sort of paraphrase it, that they had, he recognizes they had both at Disney Animation and Pixar some stumbles of late with movies that underperformed and stuff like that. So I think they're going to say, look, we need to have some more surefire movies that'll make some money.
Well, let's sit right here on this section, right? This statement. I definitely agree that Pixar had some, I wouldn't call them mediocre movies, but movies that also weren't home runs or lasting, right? So some of them were very good. Soul was good. What was the last one that came and see that?
Lightyear was the last one.
Lightyear. That was Disney. What was the last Pixar movie that just came out?
Well, that was Lightyear was Pixar because that's Toy Story themed.
No, the Disney animation one then.
Disney animation. Oh, they just had Strange World.
Strange World. That's what I was thinking of. Good movie. I wouldn't have paid money to go see it. I'm glad it was on Disney Plus, right? So what I'm saying is, these are 3 franchises that are going to make them billions of dollars when they come up with new ones. Now, what I want to talk about is the reaction of the fan community when they saw these three names come up. And you know what? I don't know why people put so much hate. Maybe it's just Diz Twitter. Maybe it's just the internet. I think most people say, "Oh, cool, another Frozen movie. Oh, cool, another Toy Story movie." Maybe some people might roll their eyes at Toy Story 5,
Yeah.
right? And until we realize what it's all about, hopefully it's like a new generation of toys, not the same tired old characters. I have no problem with Zootopia 2. I mean, I like the first one. I laughed quite a bit in a lot of those things. It didn't like sit with our household like we have to watch it over and over again.
Right.
But it was an enjoyable movie. So why do you think people are like rolling their eyes as Disney has no creativity left and stuff like that? I mean, Disney's known about their IP and their brands, right? It's a short way to make money.
I think that's what it is. It's rather than trying to create new stories that are original and kind of come from the story and having creative people develop new things. It just feels, I don't know if lazy is the right word, but sort of like just relying on your properties and just saying, we'll just make another one of these because we know it'll make money. Who cares if it's good or not? I think we've seen in the past, though, like Frozen 2 was great.
Yeah.
Toy Story. I mean, I wasn't crazy about Toy Story 4, but 3 was an excellent movie, and a lot of people like 2 as well. So these are movies where they've proven they can make good movies that are worth, they build on the stories. It isn't just like, some of those like where they used to do the straight to VHS type things where it's obviously just cranking them out quick. So, and I think it is, people just want more original content. And it also, I think it feels like they're building on these franchises because all these 3 properties are ones where there's a lot of Toy Story lands in the various parks. They're building Frozen lands in Paris and Hong Kong. They're building Zootopia in Shanghai. So these are obviously, it's not just about like, let's make a movie because we have a story to tell. It feels like, well, we have these properties that we're doing a lot with. We just need more content related to those properties.
I mean, the people that are boo-hooing these things, let me point some things out to you that you're conveniently ignoring or forgetting about. Disney's put out a lot of original IP in the last 5 years. Not a lot of it was great content, but they were trying, right?
Yeah.
So if you are creating new stories, there's a huge chance that they will be either failures or just mediocre stories because they're brand new. They're not relying on, they're building something new. Not everything is going to be a hit. And if you want that expansion pad in Toy Story Land and Disney Hollywood Studios to add capacity, there needs to be investment in the franchise for a new generation in order to get more part of that part built up. You want Galaxy's Edge to be expanded. You need more movies to build that content up. You want Pandora's expansion pad being up. There needs to be more Pandora movies. So the people love Pandora. They want to come to Animal Kingdom to see more of Pandora. They're going to expand it because what? You know why? Way of the Water made $2 billion or sold $2 billion worth of tickets. You need the existing IP to fuel park expansion because Disney's not going to build original IP rides for $500 million hoping it will be a success. What if instead of making Turning Red, which a lot of people like to point out was a mediocre movie, I kind of enjoyed it, but instead of making the movie, they invested all that movie to make a new ride. Finally, Magic Kingdom is getting an expansion for the last 10 years. It's Turning Red. We just invented it. What do you think? And everybody's going to be so angry when they get the Turning Red ride versus a Mickey ride or some other attraction that's proven. Disney needs proven IP to invest in to give themselves space to build new IP.
Yep.
Like if they go for years on years of not having a hit movie because they keep trying new things, eventually they're going to stop making new things, right? They need these successes to fund the studios to attempt new things. And that's I'll get off my soapbox, but I really hate how people go and say, well, maybe not hate's a strong word. I dislike or I frown upon people saying, oh, they're out of creative nonsense and all this stuff. Yes, it's true. They have invented a brand new IP. I mean, that's hard to do, to invent new IP that's successful like that. But they're still trying. They just haven't hit it out of the park. Hopefully this year we've got a couple other movies.
I mean, and
there's
been some, right? I mean, it was a little bit ago now, but Encanto, obviously, I think has proven to be, but they're not all, you got to probably have 5 to 7 of those and you get one Encanto out of it, right? Or whatever. And probably every 20, you get a Frozen or whatever. And so they're going to still do the new stuff, but they need to have these kind of known winners mixed in there as well. And so I think they're going to try to have a better blend of that versus it did feel like they were trying a bunch of new things in a row that none of them maybe really really people.
And I just hope they go. I mean, I hope they figure out what made those old stories not work.
Yeah.
And go forward. And it's not the wokeness or the diversity nonsense. They were all stories, but the premises weren't hitting home for a sec. So don't blame it on one thing. It's just they tried stuff and it just didn't work.
Yep.
So let's go on, because I've never heard this much announcements come from a quarterly.
I know this is like what we wanted from like D23 or whatever.
Right.
Right. The only other things I did want to mention when you talked about attendance at the parks is Iger did talk a lot about managing attendance, but also that they want to be able to add capacity when he mentioned new land so they can grow the business. So the idea is they want to talk about how they can manage capacity in the existing space they have, but then continue to grow out too, which hopefully, which absolutely huge. So hopefully that means, a lot of people are trying to put things together and they're saying like, okay, they're investing in Zootopia. So does that mean we're definitely going to get the Zootopian Animal Kingdom, which is the new area that would, help grow that capacity. The other thing related to capacity is they said during the most peak seasons, like, the holidays, Christmas, Thanksgiving, things like that, they reduced the capacity. So you have your park reservations and stuff. They reduced that by about 20% versus what would have been allowed in the parks in the past. So obviously, it goes back to, probably don't need a reservation on some random Tuesday in February or something. But during these peak times, they are actually trying to manage the capacity a little bit, but they also need to, if they're going to be doing that, they need to have more area that they can fit more people in.
Shove more people in. So I mean, this is huge. So a lot of people took the expansion right as immediately as they went to the Blue Sky stuff that was announced last fall.
Yeah.
And in certain places, if you know who to listen to, the rumor was that Beyond Thunder Mountain was greenlit essentially.
Yep.
What form it is, who knows? But they're going to build something back there. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later in the show. It's one of our topics. That's the Coco and Kanto and villains themed areas in Magic Kingdom. I think this is absolutely huge. There's no confirmation at all what's going anywhere or if it's just at Magic Kingdom because I would imagine it would have to be Animal Kingdom's going to get their Moana thing. I think because I believe Moana was a top 5 streamed movie, if not, like, was it top 3? Was it?
I'm trying to remember. It was definitely listed in their top. Well, Encanto is number 1, I remember, but Moana was, I think it was in top 5. It's like number 3 or number 5 or so. It was. I was remarkable how it's still consistently so.
And that's
popular.
What, 5 years old at this point?
At least, yeah.
Right. So I mean, that's huge. So they're going to add Moana other than a walking experience at Epcot, right? They want to sell more of those products. And we're not going to debate whether or not that belongs in Animal Kingdom, but Animal Kingdom is going to get expansion, which is sorely needs. The only thing we don't know about is any expansion in Hollywood Studios, but some rumors going around is they're not touching that park again for quite some time, which is unfortunate. But Magic Kingdom sorely needs that capacity, and we're going to talk about that later. But I found that absolutely amazing that Iger had mentioned the mere thought of expanding a park at a quarterly call. Right.
Yeah.
That to me, that's crazy. And I think he's throwing a lot of parks, fans, media, whatever, a bone because I think Iger thinks like the bread and butter of that company are the parks, right? That's they're always
that's what separates it from
right.
the other media companies, right?
So I think he needs to kind of, because I think they're going to see a lull with the cost because he's starting. All the stories about nickel and diming and stuff like that we've been talking about for years. I think Iger's coming back and seeing the data for that, and they're potentially looking for a decline in attendance and spending over the next from 8 months to plus afterwards. So anyway, that being said, we have one other thing that's also controversial for some reason. I don't know why. What is it, Phil?
Well, and not just the actual content and the controversy around it, but I thought, obviously, the Super Bowl was played yesterday, where we're recording this on a Monday. And big thing with the Super Bowl always is the commercials. And Disney had a big commercial that they aired a few times around the Disney 100 celebration. Ahead of that airing, they actually sent an email. I know it went to at least cast members, and I got the one to D23 members that included, a link to the commercial so you could see it ahead of time, but also just a pretty long letter from Bob Iger to these groups, basically thanking them for helping carry the legacy that Walt inspired 100 years ago when the company was founded. I don't necessarily want to read the whole thing, but in there was a lot in there just about how all the achievements they've made, but he also put in there, will have numerous opportunities for fans and families of all ages to relive their most beloved Disney memories and to delight in new content and experiences. So again, right in this letter, he's saying there's new stuff coming. And then he said, Walt once said Disneyland will never be completed. And that's how he feels about the company, Iger. And we have a lot more magic to create, and I can't wait to share it with the world. So it feels like every opportunity he's getting it out there that there's new stuff coming. Now, it doesn't mean it's coming tomorrow. That was another thing that was announced in the earnings call, that some of the CapEx that they had allocated to the year, I think around 700 million, was going to be pushed out a little bit. So don't expect, them to break ground on the 5th park or anything like that tomorrow. But there's new stuff coming.
Yep. And I can't wait to see it. I think we're going to get a big hit of that information later this year at Destination D. It should be a lot of fun. But again, there was controversy over the commercial, which I don't get. I mean, like, basically the commercial was pretty good. It hit me in the feels. It gave you a little history and everything else. But people were complaining like, oh, there wasn't enough Mickey, or why was it only in the last 8 years? And why is it all Iger property? I'm like, it was. Somebody had a list somewhere on one of the forums. It had like,
it was on WW Magic. They listed out every single character that was in there, and even just, they were like, oh, there's not enough old stuff. They had like some of the first drawings of Mickey. They had a picture of Walt drawing Mickey. They had Sorcerer. Like, there was plenty of old stuff. They didn't have every single property. I believe there were around 50 or so that were in there. You can't have everything, and yeah, maybe there's a little too much Star Wars and stuff like that. And then I don't know why there wasn't any Muppets. So you could point up, but overall it was like, wow, there's a lot to this company. They showed various people reacting to things and stuff like that. And
it was kind good of commercial.
It was just, kind of gave you some of those Disney feels that I think it was well done. So I don't know. I mean, it's like anything, you can nitpick it. And if it doesn't have the property that you're excited about, you're not going to like it. But, I don't know. Overall, I think people liked it, and I had posted that I guess some company that does like rates the effectiveness of the commercials. So not necessarily like what was the best or whatever. And the Disney one had the best scores of any of the commercials from that were in the Super Bowl, and I think it gets rated between 0 and 5.9 for some reason. But anything above a 5 is like an excellent score. Not many get that. And the Disney commercial was at like 5.3 or something like that. So it was an effective commercial.
I didn't actually see the commercial during the Super Bowl, and I was looking for it. I saw it before the Super Bowl even aired, so I didn't even know when it went on. But apparently it did, and people mostly liked it, which is good. Proves to everybody that most of the people, Disney fans that live on the internet, are curmudgeons and not to be taken seriously at all. So follow your heart. If you liked it, you love it, and feel good that you loved it, and don't concern yourself about somebody else saying, no, you don't deserve to love it. No, get rid of it. No. Enjoy the things you enjoy and carry on. Don't be concerned about other people. But yeah, that was it, right?
Yeah. So I think that was enough for the news. Those are the two key topics I wanted to touch on. But as highlighted about, making the new Disney sequels, I did want to also talk about our takes this year. We're going to build off that. And what we're going to do is list out which Disney or Pixar animation sequels, only animation, not live action, do we feel are overrated, properly rated, or underrated?
Yeah, I kind of like this one, and I'm reading over yours, and you cheated, I think, with some direct to VHS or direct to something one, but we'll get to that later. And I was actually looking at a list. There's actual lists of like Disney sequels, all nice typed up that I got to choose from in case I was missing some. So anyway, I'll go with my overrated one. And I want to say I liked all these movies. There's no like any of the overrated ones I still enjoyed, but I think it got too much attention played to it. So my overrated one was Finding Dory. As much as I really liked the story, I just like people really like that movie, and I'm not gonna shame anyone for liking it. Everybody's opinion is valid. I just thought like it wasn't a fantastic movie, but like it got a lot of acclaim, maybe because it had different people doing it. But I felt like it wasn't that movie I wouldn't have made a sequel for. That's I guess what I'm saying. I don't know if that was like franchisable type of platform, but that's just my opinion. So I thought that was overrated because a lot of people seem to like it. So
yeah, I mean, I
think it's overrated.
I kind of get where you're coming from. I think it's a well done film, and I think Dory's an interesting character because obviously she's unique, and I think a lot of kids can identify with some of how her brain works and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know if I see some people feel like it was better than the original and stuff like that, and I don't know about that. But
I didn't like the character; it got annoying after some time.
Yeah.
But it was a cute movie though. I did enjoy it. I've watched it several times. What is your overrated?
So my overrated probably won't surprise people because I have this take. I guess it's one of my hot takes, but I think Toy Story 2 is overrated. I know a lot of people think it's the best in the franchise, and I think it's the second worst after 4. But I don't think the storyline is as great as others, and I mean part of it I think is that Toy Story 3 is just phenomenal, and it was far overshadows Toy Story 2. I mean, it has. I will give it credit for having Jesse's song is a really good song, but otherwise, I don't know. It just didn't have the right mix of the characters, and I just didn't, I guess, identify it with it as much as other people do. So, again, it's not a bad movie or anything like that. But when I hear people, go on about how it's like the best in the franchise and stuff like that, I feel it's overrated.
I'm trying to now like Toy Story is like all blending together in my brain. I just want to make sure, like, in Toy Story 3, 2 was the introduction of Jesse, right, and stealing Woody and selling him off, right? That was number 2.
Yeah, with Stinky Pete and that sort of thing. Yep.
And Toy Story 3 was off to college in the handing off of the toys.
That was the end of the movie. Yeah, the main plot of that was at Sunnyside with with Lotso the bear and stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah, no, I generally agree with you. I think number 3 is I think my favorite out of all of them. First one is obviously phenomenal, but like when you go back to watch it, you kind of wince at the technology,
the quality of
a little
it.
bit.
Yeah.
But it's still an awesome thing. I think 3 had like the most feels, and 4 was kind of pushed a little bit. I still enjoyed 4. I don't know why people hate it so much, but I like 4. Okay, so properly rated for me was Incredibles 2. I think it basically took a strong initial movie and just made that franchise even stronger. It didn't go over the top. It just kind of continued the story. It didn't have to like change much of anything. It was just like another strong chapter in the story. And I would have loved for them to carry that story into 4 movies, 5 movies, whatever it might be. Because I thought those characters were really good. And it's similar to like the MCU. You just want superheroes doing fun things, fighting supervillains, and I think everybody loved the family and kind of dug it. I'm surprised that they kind of just stopped with that storyline.
Well, yeah, I guess we'll see. It took so long between the first one and the second one, so I don't know. Maybe it'll take that same time before.
What was it, like
3,
6 years? I
thought it was over 10. It was a long time between Incredibles and Incredibles 2.
I'm gonna look it up. So, what was your properly rated?
So my properly rated, and keep in mind, this doesn't mean I think it's a good movie. It's just that I think it's properly viewed. And that's Cars 2. I think it is consistently viewed as not a good movie and just clearly made to sell toys and introduce a bunch of new characters and stuff like that. So I think it's properly rated as that. So I think it's people are correct in giving it a not so positive review.
Yep. No, I'm good with you on that one. Okay, so I just looked up Incredibles, and this is a lot farther than I actually thought it was.
Yeah.
Incredibles was 2004. Incredibles 2 was 2018.
Yes.
Believe it or not.
14
I could have
years.
sworn Incredibles 2 was a lot earlier than that. That doesn't scream like 4 years ago to me. It seems like it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But I guess that's COVID time for you. What have you. All right, so my underrated movie, and I don't know if you can really call it underrated, but I have Frozen 2 as the most underrated sequel because in my opinion it had much better animation than the first one.
Sure.
It had, I think, has a better soundtrack, even though Let It Go went global and was a phenomenon. So I'm completely respecting that song as an individual. I like the songs better in Frozen 2 overall as a soundtrack.
I can see that for sure.
And I think at least in my family, it gets overlooked. Everybody wants to go back to watch the original one, but I think Frozen 2 had a stronger, like, adventure movie vibe to it versus like a princess in distress with like a love story and everything else. I really love the the adventure vibe from it. Like you had a lot of other Pixar movies and then the recent Disney movie that we just talked about where it was like they were trying to make an adventure and discovery and kind of like that whole thing, and all of them failed. What was the other one with the magical creatures with the father and the
Onward?
Onward. Like that was another kind of like journey of like discovery and defeating a bad guy and a quest and all this other stuff. Those all kind of fell flat. But I think Frozen 2 really excelled at like the journey and discovery and kind of like a, Dungeons and Dragons, like dungeon, type of plot line. I thought it was really cool. It was closer to like a Harry Potter movie than like a princess movie. So it was really, I think that's why it's underrated, because it doesn't get that kind of credit that I think it deserves, even though it made $1 billion, right? So you can't, in that sense, you can't underrate Frozen 2, but I think it's not respected for a different type of storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
It's hidden, I guess. That's my take.
And my underrated, I guess this is the one where you said maybe I was questionable in my tactics, but it is a sequel to a movie that came out. It's Beauty and the Beast, The Enchanted Christmas. Probably a lot of people listening are saying, what the heck is that? It was, did go straight to VHS, but it has like really the same, the original cast, Paige O'Hara's in it as Belle, Angela Lansbury's in it as Mrs. Potts. And she has some great, there's really good songs in it. It's not, just a quickie type movie. It's a full length movie. They added some people. Bernadette Peters is in it. Tim Curry is in it. Like, it's got a really good cast.
It's strong.
And some really good. And I think it's just people like aren't even aware of it because they don't think of it compared to all the other movies. So,
is it on Disney Plus?
That's a good question. It should be. I should probably check if it is.
I'm going to Google it. Keep going. Sorry.
But it is. Yeah, Watch Now. I have it up on Google. It says Watch Now on Disney Plus. You need a subscription.
There you go.
So
everybody check it out right now.
I think it's always one of my like underrated holiday movies too. So just that it's sort of like it's not really a flashback because it's not a prequel, but it takes place during the parts when Belle was in the castle and Beast was still Beast, and kind of they spent a holiday together there when they were still like getting to know each other.
Because I haven't seen this in a very long time.
Yeah.
And I was reading a book to my 5-year-old daughter that had like snow and like the Beast.
That's a reference to.
And I'm like, what's going on here? Like they're all lovey-dovey, but like, the Beast is now human. Like,
so it's like kind of that
like
point after
right?
she like not was falling for him and getting to know him and like kind of broke down that barrier, but before the big battle and stuff like that. So
I got to put this on, even though it's a Christmas movie.
Yeah,
I got to put it
still
on.
wintertime. So that's
yes.
So
there we go.
So that is my underrated Disney sequel. Which it's just so much better compared to like all the other like Lion King 1.5 or whatever those ones were.
My daughters have watched all the Little Mermaid There's two extra movies and like the cartoon series.
Yeah,
like, they've watched all of that.
But that'll do it for our takes. Let us know what sequel movies from Disney do you think are either overrated or underrated. Let us know on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. We are all at the DBC Pod, or let us know on Discord. Let us know why our takes are bad and your takes are good.
Yep. And just a shout out to Matt, because we're going to get to this in a couple segments. Matt and Happily Everything Disney's podcast and their channel, they're going over the top 10 old school rides. So this was, kind of like an old school movies do you like, right? Type of thing. So this, I don't know, I'm marrying that in my head for whatever reason. All right, let's move on to our topic for the day. I don't think we have a DCI update to kind of share with everybody. So this is going back to the announcement that Disney is adding more to the Magic Kingdom. I think they directly said it's Magic Kingdom. It's going to happen. We don't know what shape that's going to be in. We've also heard that there's a Coco and Canto and Villains Land kind of in there.
That was in the blue sky, yeah.
Yep. So my question is, can the Magic Kingdom have an IP-themed land rather than a setting, right? So now we have like Frontierland, Adventureland, Tomorrowland, right? They're not IP based. There's IP in them, but they're not. It's not Toy Story Land.
It's not a singular IP. It's a theme, and then there's different attractions that fit the theme with different IP.
Exactly. So like Disneyland kind of converted to this when these added Star Wars Galaxy's Edge and Cars Land and all this other stuff. Can Magic Kingdom do the same? Because Hollywood Studios is kind of where all the IP themed lands are, and Magic Kingdom is still kind of this whimsical collection of sections, right?
Yep.
So in my opinion, Villains Land fits that.
I agree. Yeah, that was my first thought too, because then you can have various attractions and themes for different villains from different IP.
So again, we're going to go back towards the potential outrage from the Diz online community. So what do you think is more likely to get anger from, and they're going to conveniently forget how all the other parks are set up? If we get like a South America land with Encanto and Coco versus I don't want to call it generic, but like a let's call it theme versus IP lands, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think the reaction is going to be first of all? Is it going to be positive either way, or are people going to get angry?
So I think this is an interesting point because I hadn't really thought about it. So I didn't know if this specific point people would get angry about. Obviously, everyone's there's always going to be people angry about whatever they do. But I think if they do it well, it'll still people be still excited about it. I know in Hong Kong Disneyland they had like kind of mini lands, so it wasn't like a full blown like Pandora or Galaxy's Edge, but it was kind of like maybe a ride, a small thing, and a little restaurant, and so those kind of had a theme. And I think if you put a couple of those together, and it kind of becomes that Beyond Big Thunder area, and they give that area a name, even if it's not Fantasyland or whatever. I think it could work out okay. So I think that might be viewed better like a collection of mini lands versus just sticking like a Toy Story land there where it really doesn't fit.
Yeah, I mean, like when I think of Magic Kingdom, you kind of you think of a grand park that is based off an original idea, right? It's still the pure Disneyland as it was originally imagined because it hasn't been expanded like Disneyland has with all the recent additions to it. I don't know if a charm is going to be missing from like having a section of Americana like we talked about a couple years ago, that type of thing, where like you have adventure. Rides can fit within a theme, but I think Magic Kingdom does not deserve an IP based type of connection. Excuse me. So my point is, I think you're going to take away from Hollywood. It would be a mistake if they did like a Encanto Land, right? It was just like two Encanto attractions and restaurant, because I think that takes away from Hollywood Studios, which is where you go to live the movies, right? You go get immersed in like a movie land of a franchise. Whereas Magic Kingdom, I think you're going to immerse yourself in whimsy and a collection of like really cool things, and that's why I hope that if we're going to get anything, it's going to be a Villains Land. And we're going to carry the Villains Land into a discussion for next week about how Magic Kingdom is physically built. We're going to talk about that a little bit later for our DBC engagement next week. But I don't think Magic Kingdom can have an IP-based land. I just don't think it fits. It'll be too clashing or too glaringly different.
Yeah.
But if they go that route, the only saving grace, it's going to be like stuck on the other side of the rivers of America and be seen as a separate entity. And again, we're going to talk about the balance of the park, part of our DVC engagement at this point. But I think Villains Land will be the better fit. I just don't think it can be called Villains Land because I think that's still almost too IP on the nose. It needs to be like the Darklands or
the Dark Kingdom or
something less like that. That doesn't speak to a person or a group of people, but like a environment, right? Adventureland is an environment. Adventure, tomorrow, fantasy. It's all in the words, right? Because they can call it whatever they want, I guess. It's still the same stuff. But I think the theming behind it can't be like, okay, so now we have the evil queen's castle, or it can't be like super IP heavy in certain areas, which is more villains tacked onto it. I think it has to be more of a collection. And I think that will make everybody happy. And I can't wait until they announce that they're going to be shortening the riverboat or the steamboat run. And everybody's going to be angry because that's already happening on several places. But again, that's a discussion for another day. Anything else that you think can shock Magic Kingdom as far as the entropy of like combining all these ideas that would be bad for it? Or do you think it's more of like a feeling of how the park is put
Yeah, I think it's got to be more the feeling. I definitely get what you're saying. I think it's got to be, like you said, Hollywood Studios is putting you in that movie, and like there's a whole setting, and it's all about that. Whereas there's kind of like sections. I was kind of thinking like Adventureland. There is sort of like the Pirates area, and there's the Jungle Cruise area, and stuff like that. So I think if you had an overall theme, and there was just like an Encanto area, a Coco area, but it still was a little bit more cohesive, then it would work better. But I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I think now that I'm thinking about it, maybe hopefully we don't derail too much. So like the Encanto segment is like you want to explore the land of the dead, right? And the color, the joy, and like the celebration of
Yeah.
that. And so like you've got some, I don't know what you want to call it, some darkness involved, or
Hmm.
that could almost go in Adventureland kind of a little bit.
Yeah.
And then Encanto is all about the house, right? It's
Yeah.
everybody's talking Mystic Manor. That's the first thing almost I think everybody thinks of
Yeah.
when they think of what you could be done with that. I don't know what kind of theme that would go into, right? That's just kind of more Adventureland type of stuff
Yeah.
that you just kind of throw it in there. But it's not going to be anywhere near Adventureland because you're going to have the whatever the new New Orleans Square is going to be in the Magic Kingdom is going to be in between all of that. So it's hard to kind of carry that through.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I'm if they're going to have Coco and Kanto in Magic Kingdom, they need to find a way to kind of integrate that both into a theme rather than just like we're in South America now and it's just random Spanish theming or whatever
Yeah.
whatever you want to be. So I think they have to be careful with that just to make a cohesive park story. Okay, so we're going to go into our top 3. And you wanted to talk about top 3 must-do non-headliners. So I mentioned Matt's posts. Is that what inspired this?
A little bit, yeah. So as Jason said, people were posting their top 10 attractions because that's what Matt and his friends did on their podcast, and people were enjoying. Like a lot of people had different rides in their top 10, and I noticed some of them were, like for example, somebody had the Grand Fiesta Tour in their top 10, and I was thinking about it. And we ride that every time, at least once. Like that's kind of like a must do. But at the same time, I'm not going to say it's an amazing technologically advanced ride. Right.
Right.
And whereas on like the flip side, like Tower of Terror, I think is just an actual incredible experience, an incredible attraction. But my kids each have done it and didn't really like it. So we really don't ride it. I can't even remember the last time I rode it. So it's like, for us, like Grand Fiesta Tour is much more of a like, well, when are we, that'll fit into our day. We're definitely doing that. But I think Tower of Terror is a quote unquote better ride. So
you're not telling your friend that's never been to Disney World, go to the Grand Fiesta Tour. It's you have to do it, right? You're talking about all the other stuff first.
So that kind of made me think, well, what are like kind of more of our must do? These are things we always do, but I know they're not, using the term like e-tickets and things like that, but they're fun rides that we get to every single trip. That is definitely a key part of our Disney vacation.
Yep. So since this was your idea, why don't you go first, and I'll criticize you every step of the way.
So Jason did put his in there. I might have had at least one of his from his list, but I came up with 3 more. So I put Living with the Land was our number 1. That's definitely the ride we ride most often. We get in at least 2 rides every trip on that.
How dare you call that a non-headliner? How dare you?
Well, during the holiday overlay, maybe it is a headliner. Yes. But the second one, I actually did put the Grand Fiesta Tour. Again, we do that every trip. We have, my son had a couple of different shirts with characters from the 3 Amigos. And one time we were on that, a cast member saw it, let us go around again and stuff like that. So definitely have a lot of family nostalgia for that ride as well. So, but like I said, I know it's not the most amazing attraction, but it's a must do for us.
My kids love going in that, the pavilion,
but, inside the pyramid,
everything else like that. They just dug that environment, and there's something about like an old school boat ride that's
it feels very Disney. I mean, even besides, obviously Donald's in it, but even besides that, it feels like a very old school Disney classic dark ride type thing.
100%.
So. And then the last one, which used to not, I don't think would qualify, but now with Galaxy's Edge there, I would say Star Tours is a non-headliner. But again, that's something we get in maybe a couple rides in that because now the line's usually pretty short. And every time I get off it, I'm like, that was really fun. Like that is just still a good ride and we really enjoy it. So for us, it's another must-do non-headliner that we fit into our park day.
I was kind of sad I didn't get to do Star Tours our last trip in December. It's just Hollywood Studios kind of just wrecked us for going all over. We just didn't have time. That place. Those are 3 good ones. Unfortunately, I didn't get to Living the Land last December. I didn't go in the summer because I was like, I'll go in December when it's got the Christmas overlay.
Yeah.
Of course, we didn't do it with the Christmas overlay. I just didn't happen. Unfortunately, we did Grand Fiesta Tour, did Star Tours in the summer, but not in the winter. So my top 3, in no particular order. I think this is one I stole from you. It's the People Mover. And
Yep.
I know I cheated with this because I'm typing this. I'm like, this is definitely a headliner because everybody talks about the People Mover. It's the most obvious one. But I put it down because it had to be said that, if somehow somebody's listening to this podcast and is going to Disney World for the first or second time, and I don't know how you're putting up with us if that's the case, but good for you. Thank you for listening. People Mover is a must do, right? It's just like everybody said, and we say a million times. It's nothing better than just getting on that ride, putting your feet up, and just taking a nice tour of the park, get the breeze going, stay in the shade, get out of the rain, whatever it might be, and just kind of relax. And if you're lucky, you can say, "Can we go around again?" And the cast members usually let you do that, unless it's super busy, and it's just really great. The second one I put, this is a headliner, but because it's such in bad shape, I don't think it's a headliner anymore, and that is Spaceship Earth. And the only reason why I said it's because when I was thinking about like what is considered a headliner, right?
Yeah.
It's got to be a ride that's consistently under an average of 20-minute wait times. And no matter what, Spaceship Earth, at most points of the day, has a wait time of anywhere between 15 and 25 minutes for the most part. And the attraction is uniquely Disney. It's probably the only thing left of the original Epcot that really like holds its weight. Test Track is too new, and probably Living with the Land is like kind of like the other only older ride that kind of like Journey of the Imagination is god awful.
It's not the original version and stuff. Yeah.
God help that attraction. Hopefully they redo it. Everybody go see Figment whenever that meet and greet happens. Go meet Figment. Make it super popular. So
ask him when his new ride's coming.
Exactly. So I put Spaceship Earth because I remember my son going on that for the first time and really loving it. That was, back in 2019. And then going on it, it was just his birthday. So we bought him a book about the history of the alphabet with the Phoenicians in it. And it was a really cool reference and he really dug that. So, I mean, like, it's kind of like getting in, into like kind of now with like the family really needs to see it, even though it's an older ride. And the last but not least is one of my favorite rides. And I think I answered Matt's thing. This is in my top 5, which is the Tiki Room. There's nothing better than I think of relaxing and watching the Tiki Room. It seems like the show gets shorter and shorter every single time I go. But the pre-show with
like
the
his
music,
siestas,
it's just like it's the perfect ride. It's just old inside. It smells old, but in a good way, right? It just smells clean and like it preserves a nostalgia because it's old. That
it's
songs,
something that could never get built like
like
today.
Like Disney needs more small attractions like this, and I hope it never changes. And if there's ever going to be an attraction at Disney World where I will stamp my feet and pound my fists and scream into the nether of the internet, if they ever try changing this or getting rid of it, I'm chaining myself to something. Maybe it's my desk at home, but I'm chaining myself to something in protest. But Tiki Room is one of my must-dos. And our last trip down there, we didn't go on until like the very last minute at like 9:00 at night. We were able to sneak on the last one before we went. And I was like, oh, thank God. So to give us a little rest before the mad rush back to our hotel. But Tiki Room is my number 3. That's usually a must-do. And all my must-dos are usually right in the same spot. It's Pirates, Tiki Room, and Jungle Cruise. But I think Jungle Cruise is everybody's must-do attraction at Magic Kingdom, so that really doesn't count. Okay, so let's move on to our DVC engagement from last week. And I apologize. Maybe this was a lame one, but it got me thinking. And the question was, what would you do to retheme Cinderella's castle? I just kind of wanted to see what kind of color schemes you want, and Phil, you added in like maybe a different princess lives there or something else like that. For me personally, if I couldn't change the old gray, I do not like the pink, but I think the blue turrets are really cool. And I think something it's just got to be a maybe not a gray, but maybe like a white, but the white probably get a little bit too dirty. It's something that's got to glow. So maybe like a Frozen castle or something else like that. If I had to change anything, it'd be it's kind of lame, but like like an Elsa, like Arendelle type of castle, I think would be really cool. Something that shines in the night and stuff like that would have some really cool uplighting, I guess. I didn't have a really good answer for this, but I just want anything but the pink, Phil.
I think we didn't get a ton of engagement on this one, but that seemed to be the general consensus was like anything but pink.
Anything but pink.
Definitely a good amount of desire just to go back to kind of the gray and blue what it was before because they have the nostalgia for that, or other people kind of similar to you, like even lightening it up even more and making it seem like a real medieval castle with the whites and the grays and the stucco and things like that.
Yep.
Mama of Six suggested going to like maybe even just doing like a Robin Hood with King Richard and Little John and Maid Marian and stuff like that, which I think would be kind of neat, like a real medieval looking castle. I was going through different characters and I was even thinking about Brave. Got kind of like Scottish old castle. Now that one doesn't look like a Disney castle with high turrets and stuff like that. So I don't know if it would fit, but I think a lot of people, that's what they want, is they want that like really kind of traditional medieval castle. And
if there was ever a new fantasy land in 20 years from now or whenever it might be, I think they need to do a better job of like expanding out the park, obviously, but that core area behind the castle needs to be more pendants and celebration and like fantasy medieval funness, right?
Yep.
I think that's what they were trying to do, but then budgets got slashed, and it didn't end up that way. But I'm with you. Let's get rid of the pink. Let's do some like kind of fun stuff, and I don't mind that Cinderella lives there. It's good. It's classic character.
Yeah, I was trying to think like
I don't want her to move out.
You could do Frozen and stuff like that, but I kind of feel like something more old school with whether it's Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, whatever, kind of makes sense. The only other idea I had was I like what they did in Hong Kong, where instead of just one princess, it's supposed to represent all the different princesses, and there's like 13 spires on it, and each one's kind of for one of the princesses. So you see like Mulan, and there's like a Mushu on it, and like kind of the sidekicks are all
cool.
around.
Yeah.
So I didn't know, something like that where then you could tie it into some of the areas. So like the part of the castle that's closest to the tangled bathrooms could kind of look like that and be for Rapunzel, and the part of the castle that's by Merida's meet and greet would look more like the Brave Castle and stuff like that. So some way to kind of like bring it all together, I think would be good. But then, yeah, having that overall medieval feel, I think works.
Yep. Okay. So speaking of castles, I wanted to talk about this in our topic, but I'm going to save it for next week because I want to bounce off everybody else's feedback. So that's just why the engagement for next week is going to be rather fun. This is okay. So now we're expanding Villains Land, right? So villains need a dark fortress castle type of thing. So my question to everybody out there right now is: would you put another castle in Magic Kingdom if it were the main focus of Villains Land, right? So it doesn't have to be a castle, but it has to be like a dark something or whatever it might be, but a big icon. And I'm not talking like you see Beauty and Beast castle off in the distance or, Rapunzel's tower where it's kind of just poking up. I mean, it's a legitimate large structure somewhere in Villains Land that you can walk through, walk around. Maybe it is the marquee attraction in the area, but something that centers that expansion around. So my question is, how does that affect the flow of the park, right? So now you have these dueling castles. I kind of like the idea of it. So would that make the park unbalanced depending, let's say they make the throughways nice and easy. You can kind of travel back and forth, but there's no surrounding lands of that castle, right? Because it's tucked to the side. It's still Cinderella's castle is in the middle of the park. So a couple questions here. Would you put another castle? And if you did put Disney did put a new castle in there, which is the main feature, how do you think that would impact the flow of traffic and the flow of touring and all this other stuff that goes with it? How does that unbalance the park, so to speak? Or does it unbalance it? I don't know. So that's the question for next week. Any other details you want to throw in here, Phil? Because I really want to talk about this, but we have to wait till next week.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to stop myself from shouting out my ideas too. But yeah, just think about, what would it's almost sort of like thinking about how your Villains Land would look, but if they do kind of make it almost like its own Magic Kingdom or like a mini version of it, what does that do to the flow and stuff? Because it's, it's not near the front. Like, how do you get people back there and stuff like that? And,
do you have
just
another
your touring style? Yeah. So think about things like that. So.
Okay, I wanted to make this a short show, but we're ending a couple minutes early, but still an hour long. So we want to thank everybody for listening. Make sure you join Discord to join in the conversation. Hop on to Matt's channel, list your top 10 old school rides, which are defined by all rides before Pandora. It's like that makes me feel old by saying that. Join in our DBC engagement starting on Wednesday and talk about Villains Land and how you want to build a castle in there. And point out where else we were wrong on today's show. That's fine. Anything else you wanted to add, Phil, before we head out?
Nope. Just if if you haven't watched it yet and you want to get some of those Disney feels, watch the 100th commercial that's out
That's
all
good.
over on TV and stuff, on YouTube and all those sorts of things. So,
Yep. So like and subscribe and follow. We appreciate everybody's viewing, and have a great week. We'll see you next time.
thanks all.